I feel like it was something that I've always done. When I was little, I would make books and write little books and staple them together with construction paper. I would also draw in my books and color over the people and kind of write words that I thought were words but were really scribbles. And it was just sort of something that I always did where I felt like it was an internal voice or conversation I was having with myself, I would say. But it wasn't until college that I really realized I wanted to be a writer. I started out as a violin performance major and did that for a year and realized that was not my path. I think a lot of it is intuitive. I was trained in sound, and so I like now to think about rhyme and alliteration and assonance almost as like internal riffing and play, and it becomes part of like the palette of sounds that I might be working with. And so I think it's helpful to me in the revision process to seek another word that might have a resonance, like tonally, with a word a few lines up, even if I'm writing in a free verse style. And I think that probably comes from my musical training, I'm guessing. I do like writing in forms a lot, but lately I haven't been writing in them. But I think when I'm writing in, like writing a villanelle or a pantoum, that kind of comes from my musical training too, just thinking about pattern and rhythm and structure in that way. I like to consider tensions and joys and frustrations and ways that language can help me wrestle with or battle with or welcome or celebrate or grieve different things in my life, or when I think more broadly, kind of things that we're all experiencing culturally, kind of our larger griefs, environmental griefs, political. So I think about the self as located in the world and then connect that with my work. Low Budget Movie was a collaboration with my friend Kendra DeColo, and we ended up meeting at a writer's retreat and finding community with each other when maybe we were feeling a little uncertain about our space within the larger community there. Right before I moved to New Mexico, and before she became, well, right at the early stages of the pregnancy for her first child, we decided that we wanted to start collaborating on poems. And we didn't know what we wanted to write about, but we were thinking a lot about spite and joy as being two kind of emotions that we wanted poems to wrestle with. And I mean, we were definitely thinking about feminism and the male gaze. And I think the conversation started where we were thinking about movies and what a low budget movie is and how low budget movies have budgets that for a poet would seem extraordinarily high, but would really not go very far for a film. So I think, you know, when we were considering the book, we were thinking, okay, what would it mean to almost like stage a low budget film in poetry, in lyric poems? And then the poems moved into experiences that either she had or I had or that we both had that we would write about together. And so we would send little lines to one another through a Google Doc and then email the other person to say, oh, you know, all yours now. So to me, it almost felt like a dance. She's described it as like being like basketball, like passing the ball. So yeah, that's how the book originated. And then we just, we ended up becoming so enmeshed and throughout the process that when we were revising it, we really lost, not lost, but we let go of our authorial ownership, and it really became collaborative. I think writing in community invited us both to be more edgy or something, or I don't know, to be more embodied in a really sex positive, body positive, joyful, feminist way. And so, yeah, I think like being comfortable in doing that felt really fun and edgy and interesting. This poem is called Love Poem with Whippets in HGTV, and it's from a collaborative chapbook that I wrote with the poet Kendra DeColo. Call me sweetheart when you fiddle with the hotel TV reception. Kiss me like a scratch ticket with one foil moon left to scrape, and I'll soak in the jacuzzi of your ambivalence, sip from paper cups blessed with saved up spit, swallow you in my open concept living room. Yes, I'm a sucker for HGTV. Don't we all get off to granite countertops? Let me swish a while in your curls. Call me crazy, but I'll slip 2 fingers into your bad cock work while we wait for the voiceover that narrates our suspense, like rare shimmers of sludge deep in a well. You and me, 2 lovers huffing a tank of nitrous that never expires. Well, the latest project book, the City Scattered poems that'll be out next year, started with an art exhibition catalog from the Berlin Metropolis show. And I was living here in New Mexico, and we had a connection in New York and ended up staying a night there, going back to see family. And we went to this art exhibit at the Neue Gallery, and it was all about Weimar Berlin. And I loved the collages, and it made me hungry to learn more about that period in time. And so I found the exhibition catalog and fell in love with it and ended up taking it with me. It was a huge splurge and very heavy to pack. And so, but that book led me to the source text for some of the poems in that project, The Salaried Masses study of wage laborers in the Weimar era. And the way that women figured in that study was really important to me, and then important to that project, to think that women at that time had jobs and they were welcomed into the market, even though they were vilified for having this economic power. And so I ended up just becoming absolutely fascinated with that study. But I found that study because of the art exhibition catalog, and I found that because of visiting the gallery. And so I think that for me, being traveling, art, and texts are all interconnected. So to speak to the process, I do a lot of research, I take a lot of notes, and then I end up writing some very static poems that I then have to go back and breathe life into. So there are a lot of versions of that manuscript that were really flat, and I was not willing to see that because I do love reading about history, and I love doing the research and just trying to ingest everything I can about a particular time period. But then not all of that can fit into the book. Sometimes when I'm writing a poem, I try to think about how the voice can emerge and feel like it's a soul speaking to someone else. And so to do that, I have to sometimes cut away what I've learned and kind of save it for myself, or let it emerge in other ways in the poem. So it really is a process of learning, and not quite unlearning, but letting go and letting surprise back into the poems when the poems are based off of research. Huck Parable started with a family mystery, and it's one that I'm exploring now in my essay manuscript that I've been working on at WISC, and I'm so grateful for the time and space here and the women-centric, positive just aura that WISC brings. But that book started because my grandfather had told us that he was involved in some way in the Nagasaki mission, that he was interviewed to fly the plane, that he was not chosen for that one, but that he was part of it. And then he has a photograph in a family album of the atomic bomb cloud. And he says that he was kind of flying a secret mission. He was a very secretive person and hard to talk to, and a couple times I would try to get something out of him and then he would clam up and get angry. And so that book started by imagining that I might be able to solve that mystery, but really it became about what it means to be connected to that story, how we're all connected to that story, and what the effects of nuclear testing after that point have meant, and what it means to live with a substance that's now basically eternal as far as humans are concerned. And so that book really took off when I was living in New Mexico as well, and I could go to the White Sands Missile Range and think about that site as a part of that history where the Trinity bomb was detonated before the US exploded the bombs that killed so many people in Japan. I love that question. It feels like you're giving honor to me that I don't deserve. To me, I almost feel like everything is like up in the air at all times, and I'm just like suddenly trying to catch it before it all falls apart. But I mean, being a mom is all consuming, and it also informs my new poems and my work. And so I'm really celebrating the things that my daughter has taught me about writing and about noticing details. She likes to look at bugs and ants and worms. And so I end up slowing down with her and holding a desiccated worm that she puts in my hand, or sometimes she won't listen and put down an ant and it'll bite her, and dealing with that, you know, and that kind of tension and what it means to have that relationship with nature. And so I welcome that into my practice too. But for me, I had to really train myself to rethink how I consider being a maker, because I don't have large periods of uninterrupted time. And so when I was a new mother, I remember feeling frustrated and grieving that. And once in a while I still do, because it is nice to imagine that that could exist for me, but right now it doesn't. So I now really try to focus on 15-minute blocks, 20-minute blocks, if I have it, and try not to let those pass by. It's almost like I'm catching them out of the air and stealing them for myself. And I found that when I do that, little pieces can emerge and then tell stories with other little pieces that I'm making. And that if I let that happen, that over time I'll have like an actual thing. But it is, you know, balance is a struggle. Yeah. That's a great question. Advice for young writers and young poets. I would say honor your voice and your truth. And if you think something is important to write about, to write deeply into that space, and don't listen if someone tells you that it's not worth writing about, or that your idea is off the track. Really honor your own wisdom and your own experiences, because each person has a really valid and valuable and just wonderfully unique way of seeing the world and making something beautiful from it. And so to honor that. I've loved being here and feeling the aura of the Curtin Palahamo family. And it made me think a lot about just the interconnectivity of generations, as my daughter has been here, and I'm really grateful that you've welcomed her here. And I imagined young Leonora playing outside, and I've looked at a lot of the photos and just loved seeing the young children here in this space. So I would say, I mean, my mother is a visual artist, and then her mother was a craftsperson. She was never formally trained, but she made little wood vignettes of scenes in her workshop in her basement. So she did woodworking. And she died when she was in her 60s of cancer. So I didn't get to know her very well, but I know her through my mom's stories, and I remember her. And then my grandmother on my dad's side was a visual artist too. So I like to think back to the way that they valued the practice of making as a means to an end in itself. Like the art was always about creating the object and solving problems for that, and honoring light and color and form in that way, in the midst of all of life's chaos. And so I am grateful to them, and thinking about what it means to be a woman artist and woman maker.